back, players. It's week 2. It's time to align your spine. Your spine has 70 joints available to it. There's a lot of potential movement within your spine, and you want to think of your spine as a prime mover and a prime instigator to help stabilize and mobilize your entire body. Of course, as we discussed last week, breath within this trunk region is really that prime organizing muscular principle, but if our spine doesn't move well, it's going to inhibit our breathing. So this week we want to make sure that we know where our spine is, what it feels like, and that we can breathe fully into it. So to familiarize you, this is a spine. This is not your spine, but this is an anatomical model. There are 24 vertebrae. You have 3 different regions in your spine. You have the lumbar, that's the lower back. There's 5 vertebrae here. You have the thoracic vertebra, 12 vertebrae there, connected to ribs, and then you have 7 cervical vertebrae of the neck. And so for our lesson this week, we're going to primarily focus on the thoracic spine, which also, of course, houses the rib cage, and that is where your lungs are. So it's very important for breathing. You need a pair of yoga tune-up balls. If you don't have squishy, pliable yoga tune-up balls, you can use a pair of tennis balls as well. So first, we're going to embody our body and be a student of our body and breath and find ourselves a check-in. For the check-in, we want to first align our spine. And for that, you want to bring your brain and your skull over your rib cage, and your rib cage over your pelvis, and your feet directly underneath your hips. If that's confusing to you, you can rely on my favorite cue in the world about hip alignment from Dr. Kelly Starrett, which is get your feet underneath your lungs. So brain over heart and heart over the center of gravity in your pelvis, which for the female is the cervix. So that gives you a really good way to organize and align your spine and activate any muscles you might need to help maintain that. Then keeping that sense of alignment, spin your entire body, keeping your feet planted, and come into a full body rotation. So this is to check how much rotation you have really from every joint from the feet all the way up, and you want to mark with your eyeballs where your shoulder is, and then go in the opposite direction and feel for the amount of rotation you have in the opposite direction. And I had more rotation to my left, and so I'm going to make a mental note of that as we roll. The first placement for the yoga tune-up balls is the upper trapezius. It's where the neck essentially meets the shoulders, and this is going to help to unhinge or intensify the clavicular muscles of respiration that we experimented with last week. So to place the balls, I'm positioning myself so that you can see me in the camera here. The balls go on that upper shoulder ridge that is often very uncomfortable for many people. Then lever your pelvis up and let your body rest completely on those tissues. And take some deep abdominal thoracic breaths. You can review last week's video to refresh your memory of that. Now I'm going to position myself so that I can make a little bit of eye contact with you. From here, start to make small movements from both your body and the arms and the shoulders so that the yoga tune-up balls or whatever balls you have can meander their way across the soft tissues in this upper ridge. So this is going to talk to the first, second, and even third ribs here, which will help to manipulate those uppermost thoracic bones. That is, if you're pliable enough, if you're allowing the soft tissues of the trapezius to become pliable enough so that the therapy balls can contact you. So if you come across areas that make you tense up or seize up, or you can't breathe well while you're here, which is very likely, especially if this is one of your first times doing self-massage, then you either need to lower your body weight to lessen the pressure, or go to a wall and do the same thing on a wall. Then let's make a new position. Take the therapy balls and go slightly lower. So their therapy balls are going to be about at the third thoracic vertebra. That's kind of where your collar would end if you're wearing a collared shirt. Bring your ponytail hair off the floor, and then lift your pelvis slightly up in order to create a rolling action. So the rolling action is that the therapy balls act like casters, and you use the sphericalness of them to drag yourself down a couple inches and then right back up a couple of inches. And impress your breath into the therapy balls. So the balls are giving you a reflection of your ability to connect with your breathing muscles into these deep postural muscles within your back. After a few strokes, then what I'd like you to do is lean from side to side as you go up and down. And so this is going to be a little bit of a slithery motion. And what the slithery motion does is it creates rotation at each one of these upper vertebrae. Now, these upper vertebrae tend to be very reluctant to rotate or to twist. And that is a limitation that many of us have because of constant chronic head forward posture from looking at computer screens and texting devices. So this is a way to rehabilitate and to bring life back into these tissues. It feels so good. Then land slightly lower. So I'm at about the 5th or 6th thoracic vertebra. I'm still in between the shoulder blades. And you can say I'm right behind my physical heart. Then let yourself experience a moment of rest and a little miniature back bend here. So this is a moment where the chest tissues, the pectoralis, can lengthen as you have this little micro back bend in your back. Then sweep your arms all the way alongside your body, coming all the way up overhead through a gigantic inhale. And then on exhale, retrograde or return your arms to the original position. So you're going through range of motion here of abduction and adduction of the shoulders while your back is perpetually in extension. And this is also a scapula mobilizer, or shoulder blade mobilizer, and that will be very helpful when we get to our shoulder mobility week as well. Then track down just another couple of inches, so the therapy balls should end at your bra strap where your heart rate monitor would be in this position. And once you get here, we're actually in the place where the trapezius tapers and terminates itself into a connective tissue plane called the thoracolumbar fascia. And so this is a really great intersection for us to try to connect with. Also, the lower traps are a really hard muscle to perceive for a lot of people. So we're going to lift your head up and then actively do a side bending motion. So this is called lateral flexion and lateral extension. And the idea is you're creating a scrub-like action at these muscles. So not only the lower trapezius is sheared by the action of the over tune-up balls, but also deeper muscles, the erectors, the paraspinals, and then the really tiny little muscles that are within the laminal groove on either side of this channel, on either side of the spine. And that just feels really great. It's going to feel like a lot of heat. And then go 1 inch lower so you're above the kidneys. You should be about at the, let's say, the 10th-ish, 11th-ish vertebra. And then straighten your legs, and then bend your right knee. And all you're going to do here is breathe into the over tune-up balls, let your body balance, and concentrate on really inflating the perimeter of the lower ribs here so that you can sense and feel the movement of your diaphragm, which is going to expand and mobilize the ribs like an internal mushroom cap or an internal umbrella. Good, so just a few breaths like that, then take the over tune-up balls out and let your body come to complete rest. And of course, within that, you can mentally suggest, again, that mindset of I embody my body. I'm a student of my body, a student of my breath. Your spine will spontaneously align now, having liberated a lot of the tissues that inhibit mobility. So now let's go through and check into all of the cardinal ranges of motion of the spine. So our first range of motion for the spine is flexion and extension. But to do this, strongly activate your buttock muscles and your abdominal muscles. But at the same time, you want to flex your spine or curl yourself as far over into a C shape as you can without letting the pelvis hinge. So I'm trying to identify only spinal flexion here. Those 5 lumbar vertebrae, the 12 thoracic, and the 7 cervical. And then do the opposite of that. Stay steely and stony in your pelvis and your abdomen and your buttocks, but now extend the spine. So in extending the spine, you're trying to bring the spinous processes, the little pokey things in the back of the spine, closer together, and the vertebral bodies further away. And I'm going to caution you against just letting your head drop back here, even though that would be an accurate activation of full extension, which is not really that warmed up. So extension and flexion, so you feel that the juiciness of those movements. Then lateral flexion and extension. For lateral flexion, you side bend. So in lateral flexion, we're shortening the one side, and the opposite side laterally extends spontaneously, just goes along with lateral flexion. So I'm trying to keep my pelvis directly underneath or over the ankles, feet underneath the lungs, as we did earlier, and then up and over, and same thing, checking that range of motion in the other direction. So this is always a fun thing to do before and after. We obviously didn't do this as a before, but you're going to be feeling really amazing stretch and length in certain sides and certain tissues here from the mobilizations we did with the therapy balls. Now, isolating each of these ranges of motion ultimately is going to help you better pattern your consciousness about spinal motion within functional training and exercise, yoga, whatever you do. Lastly, pelvis stays still, active torso, and now rotation. So that rotation is different than what we did in the beginning. In the beginning, we let everything go. Again, pelvis stays stationary here. We're blocking our rotation so that only the muscles that control spinal rotation, oh my gosh, are permitted to activate. And I feel a lot of really cool stuff in my obliques, both the anterior and posterior, and then other direction. And just like you did in the initial check-in, there's going to be probably a sidedness to your rotation. You may have more rotation in one direction than the other. And I do this frequently, so I'm feeling some unique stuff right now, so I'm excited. This is happening in real time, folks. All right, and then finally, we'll have our recheck moment. Keep your feet rooted and let yourself rotate all the way around. And indeed, I have more rotation to the left after all that. And then let's check the right side, which was my aha, good. So this feels much more balanced to me. This feels like I got a more grandiose range of motion. And so now you've got your immobilized spine, you have an aligned spine. You're going to take that consciousness and that embodiedness into whatever movement practice or just into the rest of your day. Keeping your spine aligned keeps your whole body healthy, and it enables your breath to upregulate itself and to behave in its best relationship to the rest of your body. See you next week.